camera rolls on. The ratings are waiting on the next sensation. The camera rolls on. Welcome to It Goes a Little Something Like This. You know the song called I Thought He Walked on Water. You may even know that Randy Travis had a #1 hit with it. But what you may not know is the story behind the story. How songwriting great Allan Shamblin almost ended his career even before it began.
The whole true story is I came back to Nashville. I flew in Sunday night. I got up Monday morning, and I lived in an efficiency apartment about this size of this room. And I got up and I turned the TV on, and I went to walk over to the refrigerator, and it was an early morning televangelist on TV, and I heard him say, "There's somebody out there fixing to give up on a dream." And I turned around, and he was pointing right at me. And he said, "Don't give up. The race always gets toughest just before you cross the finish line." I said, "I receive it." And I got in my car, my old Cutlass, and at the corner of Trousdale and Harding, the words, "He wore starched white shirts, button at the neck, he'd sit in the shade, watch chickens peck. His teeth were gone, but what the heck," came out of literally nowhere. And I wrote them down, and I thought, neck, peck, and heck, that's kind of corny, but thank you. And so I went in. I had no idea what the song was about. I sat down, and I wrote the words out real neat. And I got up, and I walked around in a circle in the room, and I just said, "I thought he walked on water." It just came out of my mouth. And I got goosebumps, tears in my eyes, and I remembered my great-grandfather. And I sat down, and the song poured out like honey out of a jar, as fast as I could write it. And I took it into my publisher. I played it for her, and she said, "I love it, but I think it needs something else." And like a chorus, it didn't have a chorus. I drove home, I sat down, and as fast as I could write the chorus, I just wrote the chorus out. And I called a buddy that lived upstairs, and said, "Can I come play you a song?" And I went upstairs, and his name was Arnie Dequa, and he was with his future wife. They were sitting there on the couch, and I played them. I looked down at the page, and I played what I'd written that day. I looked up, and they were both crying, and I thought, I've finally written an honest song.
I thought that he walked on water.
Mac Davis, where do I begin? A movie star, a TV star, a pop idol, and a country artist. With hits like "Baby, Baby, Don't Get Hooked on Me," and "Me and God Watching Scotty Grow," a hit by Bobby Goldsboro that Mac wrote about his own son, Scotty. And how could I forget "In the Ghetto," a classic by the late Elvis Presley. Here's Mac Davis.
That's where the song came from, and it just jumped out. And it was one of my first big hits songs. But then "In the Ghetto," I tried to write that every which way you can imagine, and it took me years to finally get a hook on it. And, that was a Joe South lick.
Tell us how that came about.
Freddie Weller,
Mm-hmm.
who was a good friend of mine back in those days, and still is. I just don't ever see him much anymore, but we live many miles apart. But Freddie was in my office, and I had just signed a contract with Nancy Sinatra, and we had an office up on Sunset Boulevard in Los Angeles. And Freddie dropped by to see me, and he's showing me a lick that Joe South had showed him, and it was And I said, you got to show me that. You know, I was just learning how to play the guitar. I didn't know much about the guitar at all. Still don't, for that matter.
Sounds pretty
But
good.
Anyway, after he left, I kept messing with it. I'd been trying. The word ghetto had not been used to describe the parts of town that it became used about. You know, other than the Polish ghettos during the, you know, the 40s, and the Jewish ghettos and during the war. But they started using it to describe parts of towns in our own country around the late 60s. And I had been trying to write a song called The Vicious Circle, which was how a child is born and a child loses his dad, doesn't have a dad, becomes his dad, child dies, another child's born. That was, it was The Vicious Circle. And all of a sudden I'm playing that lick, and the ghetto. And I went, oh, that's it. That's what I'm going. Wow. And the ghetto. And I went home that night and I wrote the song, and finished it probably about 2 o'clock in the morning. And as I was wont to do, and still do from time to time, I called Freddie up and woke him up in the middle of the night and said, you got to hear this. Sung a whole song to him. And my recollection is that he said, you son of a bitch, and hung up on me.
Oh, you know what? You know what?
And in a nice way. He did it in a nice way, but...
I think that's his recollection, too.
Oh, you talked to Freddie already? Oh, boy. Yeah, well, it's just one of those deals. I stole his lick and wrote a hit song both.
Some of the greatest songwriters in Nashville are women. This songwriter has written some of the greatest songs in Nashville's history, including one that she co-wrote with Mary Ann Kennedy, Pat Bunch, and Todd Cerny. Here's Pam Rose and I'll Still Be Loving You.
I had to realize that I actually was a writer. Changing my life with your love has been so easy for you, and I'm amazed every day, and I'll need you until the mountains are valleys and every ocean is dry. My love, I'll be yours until the sun doesn't shine, till time stands still, until the winds don't blow, when today is just a memory to me. I know I'll still be loving, I'll still be loving you. I'll still be loving you. I'll still be loving, still be loving you. I'll still be loving, I'll still be loving you. I'll still be loving you.
This next songwriter is a country music Hall of Fame artist, a man who paved his own path and never looked back, while at the same time he helped every artist he met along the way. It was our pleasure here at It Goes a Little Something Like This to interview the late Cowboy Jack Clement.
I had made a record of it myself, that Son. It never did come out, but it was kind of a demo.
Right.
And I had all the parts of it. I had the vocal group singing, Dream on, Teenage Queen, all that. Just like his record. And I played for him one day, and he loved it. Said he wanted to record it. Oh, wow. We did. That was one of the first things he did of mine, I think.
He cut a lot of your stuff, didn't he?
Yeah. And then later on, I wrote Guess Things Happen That Way.
Which is one of my favorite songs. I'm not trying to get any personal stuff into this, but that's a killer.
And I hadn't even thought about him. I wrote it actually in the mood of Memories Are Made of This.
Yeah.
Yes, me, if I forget my baby. You know, kind of a rumba.
Right.
Actually. And what's his name? I'm blanking out here. I turned 80 a few months ago, so I got a right to blank out.
We're just glad to have you around still.
Marty Stewart.
Marty Stewart.
Well, not Marty Stewart. Marty Robbins.
Marty Robbins. Oh yeah.
Came to town one time in Memphis at the City Auditorium, and I went down to see him, and I came back and went to his dressing room, and I had only written a verse and a chorus of Guess Things Happen That Way. But I sung it to him, and he seemed to like it. And the next day, he came by Sun's studio. Johnny Cash brought him by.
Yeah.
And he remembered the song, and he recorded it. I only had a verse and a chorus, but he recorded that. And as they were leaving, Cash got me aside and said, "Why don't you play that for me?" I said, "Well, I just didn't think it fits you." He said, "Well, if Marty doesn't record it, I want it." So that's what happened.
So Marty didn't?
Marty said if I hadn't heard from him in a month, he'd do something else with it. He had to play it for his producer, who was a pop kind of a producer at the time. And, you know, John told me if Marty didn't do it, let me know and I'll do it. So a month or so later, he came in and Marty hadn't done it. And I still had only got one verse and chorus. So while he was in there recording something else or running something down, I went next door to Taylor's Restaurant and wrote the other verse and finished it.
So Taylor's Restaurant was next door?
Yeah, right next door.
Is that still there?
Yeah. Well, it's not still Taylor's Restaurant. It's part of Sun's studio now.
Okay. They bought it up.
Souvenirs and some food.
That's great.
It was a main place, you know. That's where all the business took.
They went across the street to the restaurant.
Not across the street, right next door.
Oh, it's next door. Okay.
Immediately next door. There was a double wall, so you couldn't hear what was going on between the two. And then there was a stairway between the double wall that went up to some rooms where some of the Sun artists would live there sometimes.
Wow.
But Sam didn't have an office. There was a little office up front where the girls were, and then the studio, and then the control room, and then a kind of a shed thing out back where they stored return records. I finally got around and built a little office back there. But all the business took place at Taylor's Restaurant.
I went online last night and I listened to, I was a big fan of Miller's Cave years ago. Mm-hmm. And I went online, I can't tell you how many versions of Miller's Cave.
Really?
Oh man, if you go on YouTube, there's a ton of them.
Yeah.
Different artists singing Miller's Cave. And I know that you wrote that.
Yeah.
Is there a story behind that, why that was written?
Well, did you ever read Tom Sawyer?
Yeah.
Or a Huckleberry Finn?
Of course. Is that where you got the concept?
I got that cave.
Yep.
Cave.
Injun Joe got locked up in it.
Right.
Yeah, got lost in it.
And I like how it's kind of a dark ending.
Yeah. Never find me because I used an echo chamber on the last line.
Yeah.
Had to have an echo chamber.
It was great. Let me make sure
Find me because I'm lost in Miller's Cave.
Right. Like a cave. It was great.
You ask me if I'll get along. I guess I will some way. I don't like it, but I guess things happen that way.
Welcome back. Next up is a man whose song, American Made, changed the way songwriters get paid for commercials. I'm talking about songwriting great Bob DiPiro.
My first major hit as a writer, and I always said that song got me into the game.
it didn't make my life, but it made me a part of this community, you know. So, oh my God, I had this #1 song. It's huge. Everybody loves it. Everybody wants to write a song like it. Fantastic. I'm in the game. That song is going to buy me another 4 years until they kick me out. So I got 4 years to write something else at least that good. But what I was not prepared for was the life of a song, and that song found its way to an ad campaign by the Miller Brewing Company. The beer company, Miller is made the American way. And this song went from being a very big country hit to a landmark advertising juggernaut. I mean, it was the first time that a song was treated not as a work for hire, but as a per play. So every time this song got played, just like in the radio, whether it was on television, whether it was on radio, the songwriter, the owner of that copyright, got paid. Because up to that point, it was like, okay, we'll give you X for this song, and whether we use it for 1 year, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, that's all you're getting. But this was the first time that happened, and it just blew my mind, blew me out of the water that a song can have that kind of power. It's like, well, I'm in control, but I'm not in control. And I kind of like that.
In this next interview, we meet a couple who are inseparable. They are like bread and butter, salt and pepper, biscuits and gravy. It's hard to have one without the other. Tom T. Hall is known as the storyteller, and Miss Dixie, she's known as the queen of bluegrass songwriters. Here they are at Fox Hollow with the homecoming.
Well, I was going to tell you the story about the song that people interpreted different ways.
Yeah, let's hear that.
I wrote a song called Homecoming, and I don't know how many people heard it, so maybe it won't make any sense to the listeners, but it's about a young man that goes out on the road and gets in the music business, and which is true, and his father couldn't figure out what kind of a kid will raise you, you know. I had an offer to manage a department store, you know, when I got out of the Army, and my father thought, he's turning down an opportunity to manage a department store where I could get 25% off khakis. And going out and playing the guitar and singing through his nose. What's happened to this kid? What did we do wrong? And that's what the song's about. And the kid comes home to visit, and there's a girl in the car, and he's out picking, singing. But I'm driving down the road one night, and it's after this record came out, and it must be 1 o'clock in the morning, and there's a preacher on the radio, and he's talking about this guy who had ran away from home, abandoned his parents, seldom checked in. He was hanging out in honky tonks, and he'd been in jail, and neglecting his parents and everything. And I thought, this sermon's sounding a little bit familiar, you know, but it couldn't be, you know, what I'm thinking. And then he mentioned me, and we're talking about the song Homecoming, and what an asshole I was, you know. I said, no, the guy was just an innocent kid out picking and singing, you know. Hey, this guy's got the wrong idea about this song. So I wound up getting a sermon on that one over the radio at 1 o'clock in the morning. And he heard that song and just thought it was that I was a real booger man, you know.
It's that interpretation, like you say, can mean
something. And I run into other people and say, I love that song because it's the way I grew up, you know. I was a young picker trying to get started, and they kind of identify with it, but maybe just a musician's song. But.
Hi. This legendary songwriter has written 31 #1 hits. He is in the ASCAP Hall of Fame and in the Nashville Songwriters Hall of Fame. Here's Bob McDill talking about good old boys like me.
One other question, and the song Good Old Boys Like Me, is there a story behind that?
Well, that was about the time of Dukes of Hazzard or something. I was thinking that that's not really the South. That's not really the South I grew up in. And so I wanted to tell about the one I grew up in. I had a fishing buddy at the time who was, Tom Connolly, wrote a lot of history books, taught history at South Carolina, and we were sort of professional Southerners for a few years there with our Southern lit and everything. And I wanted to put all those themes, reverence for the land, the race, the father-son tension, all those things that are typical Southern themes, put them all in a song, and I did. I got most of them in there. I helped Tom do a lecture at South Carolina, and at the end of the lecture, that song hadn't been recorded yet, I was lecturing on Southern lit, some kind of Southern lit thing, and played that thing for those kids, and they just adored it. They jumped to their feet. They're all Southern kids. Jumped to their feet, hooting and hollering and applauding. And so I thought, wow, this thing really has something. That night at Tom's house, all the professors were there, and somebody said, Bob, that's good, but it'll never be on the radio. It's too literate. But what do you know?
Another thing, the line in it. I want you to tell me where that line came from. Those Williams boys, they still mean a lot to me, Hank in Tennessee. Tell me about that line.
Idea.
Tell me about it.
Probably read that somewhere. It's probably not even original, and I'm giving all that credit for it.
That's a killer line.
Originally I had, originally that darn thing had a suicide in the end, and it was so bloody. And
tell us about that. Nobody's going to know about that.
It had a suicide in it. His friend, the friend who burns himself up on bourbon and speed, but I was smarter than most, and I could learn to talk like the man on the 6 o'clock news. When I was 18, Lord, I hit the road, but it really doesn't matter how far I go. Well, originally those last two lines were, da-da-da-da, I swore I'm not going to die like that. And, saying that the friend who was burning up on bourbon and speed had killed himself. And Bill Hall and Waylon Holyfield talked me into changing that, thank God.
That's a Southern anthem. It really is.
But I watched him burn himself up on bourbon and speed. But I was smarter than most, and I could choose. Learn to talk like the man on the 6 o'clock news.
In each of the last 5 decades, only one songwriter has had at least one #1 hit. He is the only living songwriter to achieve such a feat. He also co-wrote a song with Curly Putman that is considered the greatest country song of all time. He is Bobby Braddock, and the song is He Stopped Loving Her Today.
Do you believe that the songs come to life in a rewrite?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely. Often they do. And a song can come to life at the demo session. It can come to life in the mix, in the way it's mixed. That's really important. All those factors are important. It can come to life. He Stopped Loving Her Today, I don't think ever came to life until Billy Sherrill recorded it on George Jones.
Tell us that.
I was never really, I thought the song was okay. I wasn't crazy about it. And then when I went to Billy Sherrill's office and he played me what he had recorded on George Jones, I realized then it was something wonderful. I think it was something beyond what Curly Putman, my co-writer, and I realized. And I think George Jones and his producer, I think, breathed life into the song.
Like, what was the thing that did it?
George's performance and Billy Sherrill's production.
And wasn't there who was the background singer on that?
Millie Kirkham.
Oh,
that was the icing on the cake.
That was cool.
Now, Billy Sherrill used to get criticism for being too slick and putting a lot of orchestration on those records, and that's funny because now he's regarded as great producer of the traditional country music of that era. And this may sound strange coming from a songwriter, but I think the best thing about that record is the cascading violins on the chorus of the song. He stopped loving it every day, and it sounds like the man's soul is ascending to heaven. When I heard that record and heard those violins, I mean, it just put chill bumps all over me, you know, and still does.
The camera rolls on. The ratings are waiting on the next sensation. The camera rolls on. You've been watching a Ladak Productions presentation.